Okay, I'm going to do one other thing before we go on to Rule 2, and that is to show you Rule 3A and B together so that that you can really see what's the same and what are the things that are different. Okay, so number 1 is w squared minus 2w minus 48, and number 2 is 8b squared minus 14b minus 15. So, let's go ahead and do this. Let's look at number 1, rule, and get out our factoring rule sheet. Rule number 1 says, is there any greatest common factor? Well, there is not. Rule number 2 says, is it a special factoring form? It is not. Rule number 3 says, is it a trinomial? Yes, it is. It's 3a because this guy has a 1 coefficient. Okay, now let's look at rule or number 2. So again, let's look at our factoring rule sheet. Is there any greatest common factor? Well, there is not. So then rule number 2, is it a special factoring form? It is not. Rule number 3, is it a trinomial? Yes, it is. But it's rule 3b because this is the squared term has a coefficient other than 1. So a number 1, because it's a coefficient of 1, the first thing we're going to do is go ahead and just put a double bubble. And then we're going to take the 1 and the 48. Remember, again, we do this all positive equals 48 because we take care of the signs differently. And then we find all the factors of 48. So 1 times 48, 2 times 24, 3 times 16, 4 times 12, 5 doesn't go into it, 6 times 8. Well, we also, in this one, number 2, take 8 and 15 and multiply those together. So 8 times 15 equals 120. Let's just make sure, go away. 15 times 8 again, that's 40, 120, there we go. Okay, so, and again, I do this all over way on the right in my scratch area. Okay, let's find all the factors of 120. 1 times 120. Now, guys, this is going to look like I really know math super well. I use little tricks. So how many times does 2 go into 12? 6. And then I just add the 0. How many times does 3 go into 12? 4. Come on. And then I just add the 0. How many times does 4 go into 12? 3, and I add the 0. 5. It goes into 12 twice, which is 10. 12 minus 10 is 2, and then the 20, so it goes in there 4. How many times does 6 go into 12? 2, and add the 0. 7 doesn't. 8 does, times 15. We just did it up here, and to get it. 9 doesn't. 10 goes in. Come on. 12 times. 11 does it. Next one's 12. So now I've got everything. So now let's go back here. Our next step is to pick which pair. So up here it's going to be this one. It's going to have to be a plus 6. This is on number 1. And minus 8. Now let's do our 2 steps. When I add these two together, plus 6 minus 8, do I get negative 2? I sure do. Last critical step, negative times a positive, just multiplying your signs. Is that a negative? Positive times a negative is a negative. Is that what this is? Yes, it is. That means I'm good to go there. Now I need to look at this one. Looks like it's going to be 6 and 20 if I do plus 6 and minus 20. So let's do our 2 steps. Add these two together. Plus 6 minus 20. Does that give me negative 14? Absolutely. Last critical step. Positive times a negative is a negative. And is that what this is? In front of the 15? Sure is. So we're ready to go. The difference now is, up until now we've done pretty much exactly the same thing, although on number 1 I automatically put a double bubble, number 2 I did not. So on number 1, all I need to do now is plunk these two in, and I'm done. Number 2, however, I have to still let's see, yep, plus 6b minus 20b, stretch my middle term. Now some of you might say, well, why did I put the 6b with the 8 and the 20b? Why didn't I switch them and make it 8b squared minus 20b plus 6b minus 15? I could do that. But whenever I'm looking at these, trying to figure out what might be the best, I looked and I saw that the 20 I thought probably went really well with the 15. So that left the 6 with the 8. But it doesn't really matter. Try it either way. If you try it the other way and it doesn't work, then just flip them. Remember, we learned that when we were learning about factoring by grouping. Okay, so this I can get 2b out of each of these. That gives me 4b plus 3. Then I just bring this negative down, and I can get a 5 out. Remember, I'm factoring a negative out, so it's going to change both the signs of the 20 and the 15. And so that gives me positive 4b and positive 3. These now are my greatest common factors. So I bring that out. Greatest common always comes out front, and what's left over is 2b minus 5. So you see the difference? Pretty much exactly the same thing, except for when it has number 1, when it has a 1 coefficient, is much easier. But still pretty easy, both of them. Now, could we do number 1 by stretching the middle term? Absolutely. But so go away. So we've got w squared minus, let's see, I'm going to do minus 6, whoops, that's plus 6w minus 8w minus 48. Now factor by grouping. And I can get a w out of this guy, so that's w plus 6, factor a negative 8 out, that gives me w plus 6, and then factor my greatest common factor out, and what's left. Now, did I end up with the same answer? Yes, I did. However, look how many more steps it took. So, you can do it that way, but why? Whenever you can do fewer steps, the less chance you have of getting things wrong. So, always do rule 3a with the fewer steps, 3b, stretch it out, and that way you'll get them right almost 100% of the time as well. There you go.